Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. He is Tyler Calvaruso. Another episode, another key commitment to discuss for the Penn State 2027 recruiting class. Dhillon McGee, Texas cornerback, is going to be in the spotlight for this episode of the podcast. The Nittany Lions picked up his commitment on Wednesday evening as I was actually in commute to the beautiful southern New Jersey shore. Tyler Calvaruso and I getting together early on Thursday morning here to break things down. By now, hopefully you have caught our content over at lions247.com. Tyler has the initial breaking story with a bunch of quotes from McGee about why this was the result of his recruiting process. Additionally, a commitment analysis piece breaking down a lot of what stands out, the traits on the field, what he can bring to the Nittany Lions. We're going to bring a lot of that discussion here in podcast format, and then we'll continue on talking about this cornerback class as a whole. Is it concluded now? We saw a lot of movement here in the month of June. 2 guys left. Now McGee comes on board. What's next for Terry Smith's future group of young cornerbacks? And then we'll close this episode out by discussing what remains to be accomplished in the 2027 recruiting cycle for Penn State. 22 total commits on board, the number 12 class nationally when you look at our rankings at 24/7 Sports. And so without further ado, Mr. Calvaruso, let's bring you on board. I would probably describe your attitude toward McGee on our last episode of this podcast as we were previewing his commitment announcement as cautiously confident on Penn State's end. I know that you were a little hesitant to go all in and saying he was going to be a Nittany Lion because of how things work in recruiting these days and because of the proximity or lack thereof between him and Penn State down in Texas. You had SMU, you had the Texas Longhorns trying to keep him in his home state, but ultimately he decides to head to Happy Valley. What do you make of the conclusion of this recruitment process?
Yeah, Penn State did a nice job of really sustaining the momentum that it built with McGee during his official visit during that June 12th through the 14th weekend. They held off Texas. They held off SMU, which isn't easy to do for a kid who's from Texas. It's just, a lot of those kids, those are quality options to stay home if you want to stay home. And Dhillon McGee, that was very much in the card for him. He decided to call State College home. It's a really good get. I think it's a big win for Terry Smith. It's an underrated win. He's had plenty so far this cycle, but going down to Lone Star State, getting Dhillon McGee. We've seen Terry Smith do this before where he goes outside of the region, lands a big-time cornerback that he likes. I mean, the most recent notable one, Darius Dixon, who's developed into one of the better young corners in college football. Dixon being from California, McGee from Texas. So they're really high on him. They recruited this kid while they had 4 cornerbacks on board. Like I said last time we talked about him, that should tell you everything you need to know about the evaluation. It's a great win. It's like I said, it's one that might not generate as much buzz as some of the others this cycle. I mean, there are plenty of people excited about it, but this kid can play. Penn State loves his upside. They love his skill set, which we'll get into, and they're really, really thrilled to have him on board as their third cornerback in this class.
Dhillon McGee is a rising senior at DeSoto High School in Texas. It's a suburban sprawl down there near Dallas. It's part of that area. And when you look at McGee, Tyler, I know that coming into June, it seemed like SMU was making a big play, a strong push, maybe was in the favorite situation there in his recruitment process. Penn State gets a chance to spend some time with him, and that was an intimate setting kind of here on campus for a weekend. And of course, Texas gets a shot, and the Longhorns, we know how they recruit in their home state. When they want a guy, they often end up with that guy. NIL is not an issue really for both of those programs. What is your understanding how Penn State was able to kind of elbow its way through these local suitors for McGee and propose a competitive NIL? Because like I said, that's not really something that you're talking about with SMU and Texas and being a challenge for them. They've got pretty deep pockets on the recruiting trail right now. What's your understanding of what Penn State decided to do, the approach they decided to take in that aspect as well?
Well, I think coming out of the OV to Penn State, McGee knew Penn State was where he kind of wanted to be, but he continued on with this process, took that Texas OV. And as far as I know, Penn State had the best offer on the table in the NIL and revenue sharing space. Again, that's another thing I should tell you how much they wanted to add Dhillon McGee to this class. They were really, really competitive and aggressive in doing so. And The Texas visit was interesting in the sense that Texas landed a five-star cornerback that Friday while he begun his official visit. It sounded like there was still room for him in that class, though. It sounded like that was a guy that Texas wanted to add. And then the SMU angle was also really interesting in this recruitment because, I mean, I've said it time and time again. Coming out of that SMU official visit, that was the first OV weekend of June that fit through the seventh time span. It wouldn't have surprised me if he never even made it to Penn State or Texas for an OV. That's how well things went at SMU. And I was really close to putting a pick in for SMU. But when McGee got back to Penn State and spent a lot of one-on-one time with Terry Smith, I think it reminded him of all the reasons why he loved Penn State: atmosphere, people, culture, developmental potential under Smith. And it was very easy for him to clear the hurdle of leaving Texas, knowing that Terry Smith is in place at Penn State. It's the old adage that I always bring up when we talk about Terry Smith. The word is out on him. If you're a non-region guy and you go to Penn State and you're a cornerback and you play directly for Terry Smith and you deal with him day in and day out, you're going to be taken really good care of. He's just that kind of guy. Recruits know that, parents know that, coaches know that. And McGee's support system was sold on Terry Smith. Smith and the Penn State staff. It's, Matt Campbell, the Anton Lynn, also played a huge role in all of this. And they did a nice job of recruiting the support system as well. It wasn't just the kid, it was the family. So they did a really good job overall.
Tyler, you've mentioned Terry Smith and what he's accomplished at cornerback. We know what he means as well locally in recruiting. He's had a big hand in what they've accomplished in New Jersey recruiting as well. Is he, as we stand here in the final week of June, assessing this new staff, what they're doing on the recruiting trail, is he the biggest recruiting asset in the Lasch building right now?
I don't think it's a stretch to say that. I think his personality, his reputation, both regionally and now nationally, given what he's been able to accomplish at Penn State, I think he's definitely he's in that conversation. I think he has a very strong case to be that guy. I mean, the results are there, right? He got Keyshawn Telfair out of the Midwest. He got Karan Caesar out of South Jersey. He's got McGee now. He plays a part in Western Pennsylvania, as we talk about constantly. So all those Western PA targets and commits, Terry Smith, he's got his prints on those. And there are plenty of them, whether it be in this 27 class or on the board in 28. So Terry Smith has his hand in a little bit of everything. So that makes him a legitimate weapon for Penn State on the trail. This is why Penn State wanted to keep Terry Smith around. This is why Matt Campbell moved swiftly to make sure Terry Smith did not go anywhere but Lasch. He wanted to make sure Lasch was his next stop after Campbell arrived in State College. He wanted to keep him in the building. They did that, and it has paid dividends. He's been huge for them this cycle. He's a big reason why this class is where it is at a cornerback talent perspective and from a rankings perspective as well. Because, again, he's played a role with a lot of these kids, even guys like Blake Betton at linebacker, Chu Odo at running back. Terry Smith's all over the place.
We'll talk about what he's got brewing at cornerback, and we've talked about what he has currently on campus, and he was able to be the best of any room in terms of roster retention, bringing back 3 starters and Zion Tracy, Darius Dixon, Audavian Collins. He's got young talent that's on the rise, Xavier Thomas, Joseph Johnson. So when we look around this cornerback situation, we'll talk about that in a moment. But specifically with McGee, what do you see him bringing to the field from an on-field element? What are his top traits that stand out to you? Why was he a guy that was so coveted by this Penn State coaching staff and specifically Terry Smith?
Well, speed is definitely at the forefront of the equation. He's a 10.6, 10.7 guy in the 100-meter dash. So that's an elite level of speed that you just can't teach. There are a lot of high school cornerbacks who are fast like that. They have really just impressive natural speed, and they rely on that in coverage, and it kind of gets them to where they need to be in high school. Then they get to college. They got to refine their game a little bit, and sometimes they struggle. I don't think McGee is one of those guys. He's really fluid in his movements coming in and out of breaks. He sticks with opposing wide receivers downfield, can flip his hips and run with those guys really, really well. He's good in man coverage. He's just a really overall solid prospect. I don't see many weaknesses on film, albeit there's not a ton of it from his junior year because he dealt with a hand injury. But he's a tough kid. He did his best to play through that injury. And the one area where I'd say Dhillon McGee really needs to improve moving forward as he gets stronger too, I think this will kind of alleviate any concern or issue there. He's got to improve as a tackler, a form tackler. He's willing to come down and do it, but we often talk about how important it is for Terry Smith's cornerbacks to be able to come down and defend against the run. That's a trait that he makes sure all of his guys have. So they'll work with McGee on that. Again, he's a tough kid. He's a willing tackler. He's just got to, fundamentally take some steps forward. But really, just an overall solid prospect. Again, when you wanted this kid as a +1, when you had 4 committed, should probably tell you everything you need to know about what Terry Smith thinks of Dhillon McGee. And Dhillon McGee is also in a very interesting position, transferring from Red Oak to DeSoto, because he's going to be very tested as a senior. DeSoto's schedule is loaded. They play some of Texas' top programs. Duncanville's on that schedule. So right out of the gate, he's me going up against some of the top competition in the area. And I believe there are some national games on that DeSoto schedule as well. So Dhillon McGee is going to arrive at Penn State far more battle-tested playing for DeSoto as a senior than he would have had he stayed at Red Oak. I think that's an underrated storyline in this recruitment, because when you fight those fights and you win those battles, you either win or you lose those battles, they pay dividends for you when you get to college. Because remember when we talked about Jameer Joseph, how week in and week out, coming out of St. Joe's in Jersey, he was going to be ready to go probably earlier than most because of the guys he saw in high school. And look where Jameer Joseph is at right now. Playing that level of competition, I think, will be a really big help for Dhillon McGee in his development.
Thanks for mentioning Jameer Joseph, which is the correct name of the redshirt freshman I was trying to reference earlier. I said Joseph Johnson, which is a part of my brain reaching far back. He was a 2020 commit and signee for Penn State. Didn't stick with the program long, but we don't normally record the podcast this early, so that's probably to blame partly for that. McGee, right around 6'1" at this stage, 175 plus pounds with a year of high school ball ahead of him. I agree what you're saying in terms of the degree of schedule difficulty, in terms of the degree of expectations that are internally set within your program. We've heard time and time again that a big reason why Darius Dixon showed up in January of 2025 and has been really able to meet the standard at Penn State every step of his process is due in part to what he experienced at Mater Dei, with the schedule they face in Southern California, with what the expectation is every time you're walking into the Mater Dei locker room and onto the practice field there, because of their history, because of their schedule. So when you look at McGee, is he maybe one of those next cornerbacks to show up on campus and make a run for playing early? Because Terry Smith, of anybody that we've covered in the last decade here at Penn State, has been ready, willing, and able to implement young cornerbacks, not just on special teams, not just in blowouts, but in the regular heat of a game if they prove up to the task.
Wouldn't shock me, to be honest with you. I think a lot of it will have to do with, and this goes for every kid we talk about who arrives in January. I think that's when McGee will be. You got to hit the ground running, right? You got to get your nose in the playbook. You got to get up to snuff, because you could have all the physical traits in the world, but if it's not where you need to be in between the years, being able to process and just compete day in and day out, you'll take a little bit longer to get on the field. Doesn't mean you won't get there, but you might just not be a guy right away. Not every guy falls into that realm, but I think McGee could be that. We've seen Terry Smith have that willingness, as you mentioned, to go out and play his young guys if he thinks that that puts him in the best spot to win. And you wonder how 5 for 5 impacts managing these guys moving forward, because you don't have to worry about thresholds or anything like that anymore with that red shirt year being thrown out the window. So does that open the door for some younger guys like McGee to really factor in even more right away? Maybe. We'll see how that impacts the equation. But purely from a talent perspective, I don't see why not. Again, there's going to be a little bit more desire for some physical development, and he's got to get better against the run, because you don't want a complete zero out there in that realm. And McGee is not that, but he'll be having to tackle some bigger ball carriers at the next level. So he's got to continue to improve in that realm. But yeah, no, I could see it, because again, that speed and fluidity and coverage, you either have it or you don't, and Dhillon McGee has it.
It'd be fun to follow this cornerback room moving forward. Tyler, when you think about what they have put together so far, let's acknowledge that Zachary Gleason and Samaje Robinson were part of this cornerback class going into June. They're no longer part of it leaving June, but a couple guys also were on board for a while and are still on board. And right now it's a 3-man class. Remind us of who the other two are that are committed at cornerback for Penn State, and then kind of talk us through what you see from this trio as a whole right now as being a significant segment of Penn State's class as currently constructed.
Yeah, Keyshawn Telfair from Ohio. He's your blue chipper guy who's really solidified in the top 24/7. He's got lockdown corner potential. Then you have Karan Caesar from South Jersey. He played for Bill Belichick at Winslow Township. I think he's still going to be at Winslow as a senior. I don't know. A lot of guys are moving over to join Bill Belton over at St. Augustine now. So we'll see where Karan Caesar ends up. But regardless, he's a versatile piece. He can play inside for you. He's an athletic kid, a tough kid. And then McGee. He's an outside guy with his length and his frame, his fluidity and coverage. So you have three guys who I think complement each other quite nicely. That's always something Penn State likes to accomplish with its recruiting classes, go out and get guys who could play off each other. And I think each guy could form a pretty clear role in this Penn State defense, given their strengths as cornerbacks. You could see Caesar in the nickel lining up inside, Telfair on the outside, McGee on the outside playing on the boundary, just like Telfair, depending on personnel packages that D'Anton Lynn settles on. So there's a lot to like with this group. And, we don't have Zachary Gleason to talk about anymore, who's a tough kid going to West Virginia. We don't have Samaje Robinson to talk about anymore, who's going to Virginia. And I still think he has a chance to be a pretty decent college player. Penn State decided to take that one in a different direction, but they still like where they're at corner. The way everything shook out, I think this is probably even a preferred outcome, to be honest.
Is this the final outcome? If everybody stays on board and it's neat and tidy with these three into December, signing day rolls around, early enrollment comes, is it closing up shop at this point? Is it keeping some other guys on the back burner or even at the forefront? Where do you see cornerback recruiting going from here in 2027?
It could be done. They were in it. We've talked about the guy like Louisville commit Allen Evans. I mean, that's going to be a pricey flip, though. And we've talked about the financial aspect of this. Remember, this is a cycle where they entered and they took two corners. They were going to be fine with that because they love that 2028 board. It's loaded. It's got blue chip talent throughout the region. Really, they know they're going to have to pay those guys. So we'll see what transpires at cornerback in 2027 moving forward. You keep an eye out for a flip if it makes sense. That goes for any position, maybe a late riser, but I know they like the trio that they have. They're comfortable with that right now.
McGee, top 50 cornerback nationally when you look at the industry composite rankings, number 47 in his position group, newest member of Penn State's class. And Tyler, kind of the last note as we turn the page from McGee, Texas guy, we talked about how Penn State's reaching into a lot of different regions that haven't necessarily been a part of the recruiting map for them. You go to the South Dakota, you go to Minnesota. It's really been spread pretty wide. And so when you talk about what you've assessed, I suppose, from Penn State's initial approach, knowing that outside of Terry Smith himself, those Pennsylvania ties, those roots are still being kind of laid down by this new staff and Matt Campbell himself. What do you make of how they've kind of strategically had to go beyond what we would call the footprint here for Penn State and how it's worked out for them?
No, yeah, I don't think anything that transpired going out to get specific guys who are outside of the region has really surprised me this cycle. It's not typical places we discuss in Penn State recruiting. I couldn't tell you the last time Penn State went into Minnesota or went to the Dakotas to get a guy before this cycle. But it was all expected because as soon as Matt Campbell and his staff got to State College, we looked at that 2027 board. We looked at who their top targets were, and we knew we were going to be in for a cycle where they were going to rely a lot on previous relationships. And they've done a fine job of building relationships regionally and in Pennsylvania. I think they know that they still got to continue working at that, getting comfortable with the most important coaches in the area, the most important people in the area in Pennsylvania and Jersey, DMV, all that stuff. They know that's going to be crucial for their recruiting success. They want to build through high school recruiting, as we've said time and time again, and they want to be really strong in the region. So they got to continue to work at building those relationships locally, and they're going to continue doing that. And they've had some wins in that regard. But they can still have this ability to branch out more into the Midwest because of the relationships they have out there. So this cycle specifically, nothing that has transpired in terms of getting specific guys from specific places has shocked me to any degree. In 28, it's going to be more regionalized, localized, but you'll still see that Midwest footprint play into the mix. Like a guy like Carter Barrett, who's a top 24/7 offensive lineman I wrote about yesterday. He's from Iowa, and he's going to be a big-time target at his position for this staff. So you're still going to see plenty of it, but end of the day, they want to live locally and regionally. They want to be strong there, and they're going to work hard at making sure that happens.
Yeah, you figure this staff will always have some eyes on Iowa, considering where they came from. They've got a top 24/7 receiver and Landon Bloom committed from that state. But a few other states that I didn't mention there leading into the question to Tyler, Utah is represented in
Yeah.
this class. Louisiana, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Rhode Island. That's New England has been kind of always in the wheelhouse for Penn State, but they are kind of scattering around for this class and assembling in. As things stand, 22 players on board, Tyler. It's a number that's kind of gone up and down a little bit in the month of June, but as things stand, 22, 12th nationally in our rankings at 24/7 Sports. You've got a nice little collection of 24/7 top 24/7 guys. Bloom, who I mentioned at receiver, Cooper Terwilliger at tight end, Elijah Gurton at defensive end, Keyshawn Telefair, who you just discussed, at cornerback, Aiden Gibson at running back, Stanley Montgomery, the Philadelphia defensive lineman, and then David Tarawali, who's a fast rising offensive tackle out of Ohio. As currently constructed, what do you make of who the names still out there are that we need to know? And if there's not many of them, generally speaking, what are the positions that you would consider to be kind of priorities as Penn State looks to further construct its first full recruiting cycle class under this staff?
In name specific, it's really just Khalil Taylor, wide receiver, and on the offensive line, you got Lucas Roa and Oscar Rebersink. So Taylor, I mean, we'll see. July 6th, there's a lot of time. I know it might not seem that way on the calendar, but in the recruiting world, with all these conversations that take place, there's a lot of time between now and July 6th, and Penn State's going to continue to fight that fight and be aggressive with Khalil Taylor. They're fighting Nebraska, they're fighting Colorado, so we'll see where that one goes. I truthfully wish I had something a little bit more concrete to share with you guys listening, but I mean, this recruitment has just been a whirlwind, and Taylor's sorting through everything, so we'll have the latest over on the site as it becomes available. But like I said, Penn State's going to stay aggressive.
Look, I think people who are listening, and I think hopefully our VIP subscribers, in which I hope it makes up a significant portion of you over at Lions247.com, you know by now that if Tyler has info he can pass along, it will be passed along. He's not holding anything back from you. Additionally, he's not going to pump that sunshine. He's not going to tell you things are rosy and cheerful and trending in a good direction unless we have firm intel on it. And yes, there have been times in the month of June where we have had extremely firm intel that things are working in a positive direction with specific recruits. Deshaun Hall comes to mind as one coming out of his official visit when it felt like he was in the bag for Penn State. 2 weeks later, he's announcing a commitment to Auburn. But just to reinforce what Tyler said, when we have it, if we have it, it will be on Lions247.com as soon as Tyler can find his way to a keyboard, even if it's the one on his phone. I promise you that. And 50% off right now gets you on board for our VIP coverage at Lions247.com, not just for the recruiting cycle here and the 2028 recruiting momentum that's starting to build, but we're five and a half weeks out of preseason camp. And we're going to be back on the field. We got 50 new players to figure out how they're going to function. And so much going on behind that paywall at Lions247.com. And we hope you join us over there. Give us a chance to prove it to you. And you'll get to do that for 50% off. So, Tyler, sorry, just want to step in, reaffirm what you do a little bit, and also plug our coverage a little bit more.
Look, that was a pretty good plug. That was
Thank
smooth.
you.
I don't know if I would have been able to pull that one off. But no, in all seriousness, so Taylor's the guy at receiver. Receiver's a position where, regardless of what Khalil Taylor does, they'll keep an eye out for late risers, flips. We've talked about guys that we like. Jamar Taylor, the Rutgers commit, Mikey McQueen, the Syracuse commit, who was really good at Penn State 7-on-7 last week. So they'll keep an eye on guys like that. And we'll see where things go. O-line, it's Lucas Roa and Oscar Rebersink, as I mentioned. Roa, I don't expect it. I think Penn State's still in the mix as a wild card, but I think Texas is in a good spot there. UCLA's in a good spot there. Oregon's probably even in a good spot there. It's the same thing, just not as aggressive in the NIL and rev share space as others involved in that recruitment. Rebersink, we'll see. He's an interesting one to me because he has this express timeline of, taking things a little bit longer. But I know Penn State likes where it's at with him as well. So we'll see. I could still see him in this class. Definitely see him in this class when it's all said and done. Maybe even come together a little bit sooner than we anticipate. We'll see where that one goes. Beyond that, I mean, those are the specific names. Position-wise, mentioned receiver. I think tight end, if it makes sense. Taylor Mazur keeps out an eye out, maybe a third guy. Tight end's always very interesting because it's a very late developing position. We've seen Penn State add tight ends late in the cycle frequently throughout the James Franklin era. Guys who were either high school quarterbacks who blossomed with tight end traits or tight ends who just really took off as seniors. Remember Brian Kordovich? He was a late add in his recruiting class, and Penn State had him out to a camp, and they kept an eye on him throughout his senior year, and then they offered in November, and he signed in December and was on campus in in January. So we could see something like that in 27, even though they like what they have at tight end with 2 on board. If a guy really, really catches Taylor Mauser's eye, he has a chance to be in this class. We'll see. Trenches, they'll keep an eye on it. Linebacker, I think they like where they're at there. We'll see. Maybe a guy like Mike Harden, who's committed to Boston College now, later on in the cycle. Maybe some other linebackers out there who are athletic and can do multiple things for you defensively. But they love what they have in Case Alexander and Blake Benton. They won't overextend. Cornerback, we touched on. Safety, maybe, you keep an eye on a guy like Gabe Jenkins, see if you can make something shake at the end of the cycle, depending on how things play out with Colorado. That's another position group they like, where they have their duo of Johnny Gillette and Caleb Cooper. But if it makes sense at on the back end of the secondary for Dion Broomfield, I think that's something they explore. Running back's another. I left running back out because I don't really see anything coming to fruition with Aiden Gibson and Chuoto committed. But I've had it come up in conversation. Hey, look, if there's a guy, whether it be in the region or nationally, who really takes off and they could get in and add more depth to that running back room, it's something they would kick the tires on.
That's another one, that running back, you think you're going to lose a guy who's a senior in Carson Hansen, but now with this 5-for-5 role incoming for the NCAA, he could be around for a 5th year as a super senior or whatever you want to call it. And that is a subject, by the way. Daniel Gallen has a piece up over at Lions247.com on Thursday morning regarding how this 5-year plan for NCAA regarding their eligibility, where you're essentially neutralizing the thought of a red shirt and just saying you have 5 years to play. Check it out, because there's some names that are going to be impacted on this Penn State roster, guys that you just thought were going to be done with eligibility that won't necessarily be done. And it's a conversation we will bring to this podcast before we get into preseason camp, I think, at some point in July, because it's worth discussing. But really appreciate your perspective, Tyler. I guess the last thing to note here is, how differently might this Matt Campbell staff be able to recruit on behalf of Penn State when they are on the field, when they are, let's say, winning games, stocking up some momentum on the field going into October, perhaps? How differently could you see them being able to recruit? I don't know how much that maybe impacts what they're going to spend on specific individual players and how their strategy from an NIL standpoint is going to go. But just in terms of the power of persuasion, the power of turning the heads of guys who may be committed elsewhere, guys who may be late risers in their senior seasons, what would a strong start to the year do for this program? Because let's be honest, as much as you might be excited about a new staff, last time we saw Penn State on the field, they were falling incredibly short of expectations, losing 6 consecutive games, firing Coach Franklin, who was pretty well liked by a lot of recruits out there. So what do you think that would mean if Penn State was able to start on a strong foot under Matt Campbell on the field, start to gain some traction in that regard? How can they then pour that into recruiting and maybe impact the way they finish out the 2027 cycle, in your opinion?
So for me, there are 2 sides to this. One, the first side, in this specific situation, I think it would be huge for them to get off to that kind of start. Because when you're able to stockpile wins in year 1, you go out, let's say you beat the Michigans, the Washingtons, and I think that's going to be a sneaky tough game for Penn State going out to Washington. You're able to go out and win games like that. You go from selling your vision for the future of the program as a staff to tangible results. And I think that would be huge right off the bat, whether it be with 27s or building momentums with 28s. I think that'd be really big. Because again, vision is one thing. You can get guys to buy into vision. That's all well and good. But if you can sell vision plus tangible results, that takes you to a whole nother level. And yeah, I'll say it over and over again. Winning is not the end all be all in recruiting, but it sure is important. So yeah, no, I think that'd be really big. Now there's another side of the coin too. Let's say there's some, narrow losses, some results that could have went one way or another. These coaches tend to be pretty good at, hey, look, we're still early at building here. We're really close. We get a guy like you in here. We could take that next step. That's something coaches are really, really good at. So while I do think the wins are going to be important and, would really help this Penn State staff, I do still think there's an angle to sell recruits if you don't get off to some torrid start and start stockpiling wins right out of the gate. But it's a great question, because I do think in this specific situation, coming off the season Penn State just had, where the brand, you talk to recruits, it took a little bit of a hit. It's still a big one, but, guys, they're waiting to see what's next for this program. So if you go out and make statements on the field early, I think some recruits who might have questions about the way things are as we talk right now, those questions might be answered and might come back around, give Penn State an even more serious look than they're already giving them. So yeah, it would be big.
You only get one chance to make a first impression. We'll see what that looks
Yes.
like this fall for Penn State. We're getting closer and closer. We're now under the 75-day mark. If you've been following our countdown to kickoff series at lions247.com, we hope you spend a lot of time on that site. We'll be back with a live podcast. It's something we plugged a little bit in our last episode. If you missed it or you forgot about it, we are going to be locked in at 11 a.m. on our YouTube channel, Lions 24/7 over at YouTube. It's where all of these episodes end up landing after they're recorded. We're going to go live with you this time. And if you're following the page, so if you're not yet, you should follow it now. If you follow the page, you'll be able to engage with us in real time, which means you can react to some of the stuff we're saying. You can throw us a question. We would love to hear your feedback. We are going to really work our way through what occurred for Penn State on the June recruiting trail, from the commitments to the decommitments to the flirtations with other recruits to some prospect camp observations. We got a lot to get into, Tyler and I, on this live episode. And as I mentioned, I've teased it a few times, we're going to be bringing you a lot of live episodes as we work our way toward autumn and into the season. So this will be a good run for us to see what that looks like, for you to see what that looks like, and we'll work through it together on Tuesday, 11 a.m. So Tuesday, June 30th, that is the next planned podcast for us, and we'll have a lot of fun with it. Hopefully many of you can join us over there on our YouTube channel. If you don't and you can't, then you'll get to see the recorded version that'll be waiting for you over at YouTube as well. And we'll make sure that we alert people on a reminder of this stuff over on our social media channels and over on the message boards at lions247.com, because I know that's a few days away. But Tyler, good stuff. It should be a fun time sitting down with you on Tuesday. We'll see if you get a little bit of a reprieve this weekend, because for the first time in a long time, there are no recruits swarming to State College to spend time here. So appreciate all the work you have put in. We'll get back together on Tuesday, but thanks for breaking down McGee, cornerbacks, and what comes next.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me back on the live show. It's going to be fun. You got any questions for me in the chat, bring them. I'll answer them. Unless they're stupid, then I'm not going to answer them. But, no, in all seriousness, I'm excited for the live show. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So, no, but this was a great talk. Penn State's class, it's coming together. We're almost towards that end of the cycle. It's crazy. I remember when Campbell first got here and we were first getting this ball rolling. Now we're at 22 commits. So, it's been a lot, but it's been fun to cover.
Might as well take my shot here to promote again. If you ask a stupid question as a VIP subscriber on the message board, I guarantee you Tyler will respond, because that's his job, and he does it at a high level. So stupid questions are welcome on the message board. Maybe not as much for a free YouTube subscriber, but we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks, Tyler. I am Tyler Donahue. He is Tyler Calvaruso, and this has been the Lions 24/7 podcast.